Hello again and welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch break and it is really nice to see you for this afternoon session. Now, there's been a lot of information so far, and all of the content from today will be available to view on demand within 24 to 48 hours. So don't worry if you've missed anything earlier, you will be able to catch up. Now, though, let's dive back into one of the many focal points of today's event. As we all know, the pandemic has forced many organisations to transform quickly to ensure continuity of public services. Moving online has had a major impact on public sector organisations, and in particular on their learning and development strategies. Now, because of the move to a more hybrid working model, learning has become more mainstream. But how do you overcome the cultural challenges that this presents? And what will workplace learning look like in the public sector moving forward? Well, we have a panel to discuss this and many more issues, and our discussion is on the future of hybrid working, or hybrid learning, I should say. And our panel are Claire Campbell, who is the Deputy of HR Research and Consulting, Institute of, or for rather, Employment Studies. We also have Peter Brogan, who's the Head of Research and Insight, Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management. And we also welcome Pedro Arcane, who's Postdoctoral Fellow, People in Government Labs. So hello to all of our panel and welcome. Nice to have you with us. And of course, audience, don't forget, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A session. And that's on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll do our best to get some of those questions in the discussion as we progress. So back to our panel. And let's start with you, Pedro, because you're doing some really interesting research on hybrid work in the public sector at Oxford University. Can you tell us about that and also the main findings and insights that you've had so far?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Samina. Just a few general remarks. The COVID pandemic made it really clear that there can be no doubt whatsoever that having an effective public service is critical, and that the work of public servants truly matter to respond to problems that are not only complex but also urgent. However, this pandemic, it has also exposed a lot of cracks that were probably not so clear before, or maybe that not much action solve them. These cracks, they can be related to a series of things, such as the lack of agility to respond, the inadequacy of internal processes, or the insufficiency of technology. But when starting this research at the University of Oxford, we wanted to look at one specific element in this whole picture, and how public servants were experiencing work life during the pandemic. And one clear disruption was mandatory pandemic-induced teleworking. So in April 2020, the people in the University of Oxford partnered with Duke University in the United States to run a very first research aiming to understand a bit better how public servants were experiencing teleworking during the pandemic. And at the moment, after receiving more than 4,000 responses from 33 different countries, we have identified some common challenges public servants around the world were facing. For instance, the lack of boundaries between private and work life, a strong difficulty to concentrate because of constant interruptions in their home, and social isolation. These were the most significant challenges to work life that we identify, and it was common in virtually all countries. But we then, after identifying these problems, these challenges, we decided to take the next step and identify potential interventions to help improve public servants' well-being and their productivity while working from home. And to do so, we partnered with 16 researchers from 10 top-notch universities around the world, including Harvard University, the University of Surrey, Utrecht University, among others, to design an experiment to test some low-cost behavioral interventions to improve public employees' well-being and productivity. And to do so, these two interventions, the first one was called Go, Block, and Measure, so GBM. A clear definition, we asked public servants to clearly define their weekly goals, to plan ahead, and to measure their weekly achievements, and a second intervention, which we call building social ties. We asked them to join different kinds of virtual activities to increase organizational socialization. This was a 9-week experiment that we ran in 3 countries, Brazil, Chile, and the UK. And we are currently looking at this information, all this information that we have gathered. Although this is still an ongoing study, meaning that we do not have final results yet, and that we will know how well these interventions worked by the end of July only, we did look at a series of results coming from questionnaires answered by roughly 2,000 public servants in Brazil, Chile, and the UK over the course of these 9 weeks. And basically, some of the findings that I thought it would be interesting to discuss here, and I can go deeper and even mention some other ones as the conversation goes. The first one is that public servants have a strong preference on keeping a hybrid work arrangement. And the most usual response is that they want it for 3 or more days to be working from home. This is the case in Chile. 68% wants 3 or more days, while in the UK this number goes up to 80%, and in Brazil we found that 85% of public servants wants to work from home 3 or more days per week. Another general finding related to productivity, and we measured that across, is that perceived productivity remains stable in all 3 countries, but the public servants with stronger preference for remote working arrangements, they perceive themselves as more productive. That can be some sort of bias, but people who want to work more from home tend to see themselves as being more productive since
And
the
are
beginning
they?
of the
Are they more
pandemic.
productive, Pedro? Sorry to interrupt you, but are they more? But you said perceive themselves,
Yeah, that's a quite challenging question from a measurement
right?
perspective. We are analyzing administrative data from governments that actually have numbers on how much they have produced. We
Right.
haven't crossed this data yet, but it seems that from a first analysis it was kept stable, so it did not decrease. It seems to be what we're going to find at the end of the day, but we cannot claim that yet. And then another is sort of related to what the other panelists are going to mention, is that main challenges faced by public employees while they're still working from home now. So the second questionnaire was conducted in from June to October 2021. So the results related to the main challenges are still quite similar to those we found in the research we conducted in April 2020. So once again, public servants said that lack of boundaries between private and public and professional life have been struggle. They are bothered by distractions, and the lack of human interaction and the feeling of disconnection, although less of an issue right now, it's still quite constant. And
Okay.
within the people who is being more challenged right now, there is one finding that I find particularly interesting because I don't see literature looking or discussions focusing around these. But managers, they actually have been facing more challenges in the 3 countries that we've analyzed. So civil servants holding managerial positions, they are less satisfied working remotely than non-managerial employees by a margin of more than 10%. So on average, they said also not only that they are less satisfied, but that they would like to work fewer days than non-managers. They wanted to work few days from home than non-managers. And they also declare more frequently that non-managerial public employees that they feel a lack of human interaction, poor communication is being a problem, and that they're not currently feeling enough support from their institutions. They also reported more problems managing their own workload, as well as blurred boundaries between work and leisure time in more intense, in a higher percentage than managers. Same as poor time management and the need to prioritize, and also challenges managing their workflow. Really consistent across the countries that managers are struggling. But we've been about new forms of leadership and how managers should lead their teams, but it seems to me that we look less is said about how they are actually facing this experience themselves.
Okay.
It's yeah, and
I was
just
going to say,
final
yeah,
point. Oh, please go ahead.
no, I was going to say, you carry on. You're saying one final point because there's a lot there to unpick. So give us your final point, Pedro, and then we'll come back to some of that.
Absolutely. So, and my final point would be that younger public servants, those from 20 to 29, they are remarkably satisfied with teleworking during the pandemic. Also, less satisfied than other groups, and they have experienced problems managing their own workload, but mostly are interacting with the others. They are not feeling part of the company, or they're struggling, especially when they are newcomers to a given company. They've been struggling way more than usual, and I can unpack these and other challenges further as we move on. Thank you so much.
Great. No, that's brilliant, Pedro. Thank you very much. And I was going to ask you how much of this was age dependent, and you actually brought that out in the last point anyway. Peter, there was a lot there to unpack, wasn't there, obviously? And I guess some of these findings, most of us will be listening and thinking, yep, well, we're not really surprised because actually we're living that and we are feeling that, a lot of us, and certainly lots of us within a certain age group. But I just wondered what else you could add to that in terms of the general way that we feel about hybrid work and how it's working or not working, as may be the case.
Hi, Samina. Hopefully you can hear me if I get the nod. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So a lot to unpack there. Who would want to be a manager for one, but we're not trying to advocate or put anything on that. For us at the Institute for Workplace and Facilities Management, very quickly, we're a professional body. We have 14,000 members. So we've been closely studying this, particularly over the last 2 years with basically consumer polls. So we've been using nationally recognised research agencies in the UK to do some of the consumers. So they're both public and private about their views about hybrid working and particularly returning back to the office. And some other factors that Pedro's picked up on is obviously that collaboration, that feeling to be part of something is important, the culture of the organisation. No doubt the dreaded COVID was a wrecking ball to many organisations' digital transformation. Many organisations were adverse to what we're actually conducting today to do business, which actually forced certain sectors' hands to go down the route of using various software as this to maintain business. And that's changed their digital transformation plans going forward. I think also there's been hygienic reasons as well as a concern. And I think for us representing FMs, it's actually put security and cleaning back on the map, that importance of cleaning, which sounds bizarre, but we do have members and service providers that represent that industry where cleaning and cleaning regimes are as important now as they've ever been. And a lot of employers or employees are now interested in actually what they are. So I echo Pedro's point about managers, the issue of presentism, that you have to see Samina or Peter in the office to show leadership. I think there's elements for that for any ages. So I don't want to go into the whole debate about the age, but from our studies, very much the people under 25 need for office and a sense of belonging. Some of that might be social economic factors. If you look at big cities, not only in the UK, but globally, a lot of people live in rented accommodation. A lot of that is shared accommodation. A lot of that is people working off laptops on their sofas or balanced on a kitchen table. So in terms of them, the office is a break away from living at home with mum and dad. And you can see the other debate at the moment with inflation and prices of energy going on at the moment. The likelihood of people's kids leaving homes is probably even longer now. I think the average is in the mid-20s now in the UK. So all these factors have to be put forward in terms of hybrid working and the purpose of the office. So in terms of our members and our corporates, many people are looking at how they reimagine their workplaces and actually get that sense of belonging. So to encourage the workforce in, Pedro's already mentioned it, a lot of the big cities have encouraged staff to come in 2-3 days a week. Slowly that's happened over the last 2 weeks. That figures out of London and Manchester are seeing traffic levels at the same level they were pre-COVID. So people are getting the confidence now to go back in. And I think it's important. Our own government has been very pro-office. If you look at the policies that have been coming out in terms of the impact not only on the office and the individual's health and well-being, but the local economy that drives as well. And that's a factor that shouldn't be forgotten. And not to miss the piece of this webinar is how people learn. So learning can be done in many ways, as we know, and can be done in this format as well as classroom-based. But there is a sense of understanding individuals, understanding who you work for, and there is a balance now that I think, given the power of choice, because there was a workplace commentator that described for the last 2 years everyone's been their own boss. What they mean by that is that you can you can sit there and not necessarily go on camera, so you don't have to do that. You can work till you want. So in some ways you can take the lunch when you want. So people have had that power of choice, and I think that's where employees will start questioning what is the purpose of me going back into the office. And I think that's really dependent on different organizations, workplace strategies, and for them understanding that dreaded silver bullet, which the P word was brought up about productivity. A lot of this will be organizations that have shareholders, boards that have a lot of real estate stock that they don't want left empty. So I'm afraid some of this will be cultural decisions, but some of it will be finance-based decisions. And I think there's a balance of getting this right for staff. But I do echo Pedro's comments about managers, because they fall in between that rock and the hard place. They probably have the line management reports of that younger staff, if I use the ageist term there, but also the reporting to their senior management and board. So in some ways, the pressure of the manager is probably even more intense to get that balance right. But it's a struggle at the moment. The hybrid working still to be panned out. Many workplaces, but it's not actually a new concept. It was called working from home and agile working before. So I think we need to take it into context that hybrid working, if we're having this debate next year, might look very different as businesses go back to some form of normality, if that's the right term, post-COVID. A lot of this is a bit of an unknown at the moment in terms of how hybrid working, is it something here to stay, or is it something we talk about between the period of 2020 to 2022, 23? It might be something that might go away.
Right. Well, let's see. It is a moving beast, isn't it, in that sense? Claire, I wondered if you could move us on a little bit in the sense that can you talk to us about how you would stop hybrid working having a negative impact on certain groups?
Yes, I think, well, firstly, welcome. And just to say, I've been working in this space for the past 6 years around flexible working and hybrid working. So pre-pandemic, helping organizations who wanted to embrace flexible working. And then obviously, it's been a fascinating time to be in this space and follow the journey over the last couple of years. I think I suppose I slightly, because of that perspective, I don't really like the fact that the last 2 years has been seen as an experiment in hybrid working, because it hasn't. It's been enforced home working during a pandemic when people are dealing with so much stuff in their lives and general anxiety and fear. So I don't, when people come out and say hybrid working doesn't work based on the last 2 years, I think that's unfair. And that's not what we're hearing from people who want to keep some of what works from this way of working for the future. But yes, it hasn't been the same experience for everyone. And if we're not careful, we design something that won't work for everyone for the future. Obviously, many people have not been able to work from home and had that luxury over the past few years. And employers need to be careful when they're messaging what the future of work looks like for their workforce. If they have frontline workers, if they have people who haven't been able to work from home, they're not excluding that those people also get choice and flexibility in how they work. Maybe they can't work from home, but can we give them choice in other ways in terms of, when they work or how they work their working day, and give them a bit more choice and control there. So that's one way we can avoid kind of dividing audiences. The other is, as we've touched on in the discussion already, I think is about, you'll have some people really enthusiastic to be in the office 4 or 5 days a week, often your leaders, often your younger staff who feel that need to connect. And then this sort of tier in the middle, as we've talked about, who are less keen and would rather actually maintain a fair bit of home working. And again, there we need to be careful not to create different audiences, and I think very consciously design work that works in a hybrid way, not just do things like recruitment, training, performance management in the way we used to do it before pandemic, but sticking it online. We need to make sure things like, it's not the person you see in the office every day who gets the high rating in performance because they must be a good worker. We've got to make sure performance focuses on outcomes. We've got to make sure learning and development is for everybody, not just those who can come into the office. Because really, adopting greater hybrid working should unlock work for people who do have barriers to work. And that's going to be really important. We're in a really tight jobs market now with far, far more people employed than ever before and less people looking. So we need to work hard to attract people who might be locked out of work, and access to home working and hybrid working is a good way of doing that.
Can I just ask, is it not inevitable that you will divide the audience in the future? Because there will be some people who will be delighted with the future model of hybrid working, but obviously some won't be. And that's just going to be a fact of life, isn't it, surely? Because we've had that already, haven't we? It does work for some people, it doesn't work for others. And
you see it every survey I've read. You've got people who would like to be in the office 5 days a week, and people who would like to be at home 5 days a week, and every pattern in between. So yeah, and this is where it's really important. And a lot of my conversations with organisations are about understanding the way you are managing hybrid and the vision you're putting for hybrid working in your organisation, and that's got to be right for your organisation. There isn't a one size fits all answer to what hybrid working needs to look like and how you should do it. It's got to fit with your organisation culture and job design. And we touched on productivity already, and what's going to actually create, the right environment for your organisation to succeed. So, I've heard from quite negative stories from organisations who have said, right, everybody back in the office 3 days a week, these 3 days. That can create quite a negative backlash of people who think that doesn't give them that flexibility that they want. So, unfortunately for us all, there isn't a right answer to how to design hybrid work, but it is really about working with your organization's culture, with the employees and the messages about what they want to. And I think there's a big journey the next few months is trialing and testing and learning. And this is where, studies such as PEDRA are really important. So we treat it as a bit of a pilot the next few months to getting it right.
Absolutely. Well, let's have a look at how we do get it right. And I just wondered, Pedro, if you have any sort of suggestions on how public organisations can design those hybrid working policies. We've not got a huge amount of time, I apologise, but so whatever you can give us in a couple of minutes would be great, please.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would just resonate what was just said, that this is, organizations should take some sort of systems approach. They're not one size fits all. But we've done some research and we've analyzed 20 different manuals of how to adopt teleworking in public organizations in the past, all that we find in 20 different countries. And it seems that there is some sort of structuring which we can do it better. And one of the points that were already raised as well is that you have to have a clear vision, and you have to understand how teleworking fits with the mission of your organization. Otherwise, no matter what's the teleworking governance and the kind of structures that you're going to entrench, it's very likely that a lot of people will be dissatisfied, and it can end up in a backlash. Just one final point: the People in Government Lab is going to publish in March a compilation of all these manuals and how it's a very practical guide and very general. It's very clear about the one size fits all situation. Does not fit all. Looking at these differences and how we would suggest governments to take step by step to take it.
Okay, that's great. Peter, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the one size fits all is a misnomer. I think when it comes to different workplaces, it's dependent on the culture you're trying to achieve. A many business commentator famous quote was that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think when you look at your workplace, you have to have that at a forefront, and really it's shown the importance of the workplace. If you look at the pandemic of where certain organisations scrutinising, as I say, their real estate stock and why do we use it. There's also the caveat to this. We've got to remember many of the UK population don't have that choice. Some of them will have to go into work because they cannot work from home. So there is a balance on many of these debates. We talk about the office and transactional environments, but certain professions, engineering for one, which is still big in the UK, people need to go into work because, and as we experienced in many of our members, the NHS that were obviously flying heroes across the last 2 years and continue to be in terms of their work. So people don't have that choice. But going back to the point, it's like the debate pre-COVID around every workplace needs to be like Google. No, they don't. There's elements from that you can bring into your workplace. So I think with Claire's work probably could articulate better than me, but it's about giving people choice, having a strategy and culture that works right for that business. But please do not emulate or try and copy other organisations, because that would be a big mistake as well.
Yeah, that's a very salient point. And Claire, how do you avoid that culture of always being on, always being at the end of the computer line and literally being, available? How do you avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things we were talking there about what drives change, and we touched on line manager capability, and we're right to pick on line manager capability because, they're a key group in terms of supporting people at the moment. And I think number one on a lot of people's agenda is the wellbeing conversations and the importance of managers having good wellbeing conversations with their team. So, and I talk to managers about kind of looking out for staff you see are regularly working late, and is that a choice or do they feel compelled? Because in some cases it might be a choice, actually they've had some time out during the day and they're going to catch up in the evening, and that's their choice. But if it's starting to feel people feeling obliged to kind of be online, be always available, there's an important role for managers there around staff well-being and so on. But it does start from the top. I think, this is where senior teams need to look at their own behaviour, because if they're regularly working Sundays and their team see that, or they're regularly working late nights and their team see that, then that starts to have obviously a kind of ripple down effect through other layers in the organisation. So it does need addressing from the top, and with well-being in mind. Well-being now that is well proven that actually has a cost to organizations. It's not just something you should be doing because it's nice for people and it might avoid a few sick days. Actually, people will work, if they're burning out, they're not working for you productively. So getting a healthy balance, a healthy culture and healthy behaviors around home working are really important.
You've spoken about managers, and I know, Pedro, in your first answer, you talked about managers saying they perhaps felt the most pressure. So how do we look after them in some respects? Because they're obviously tasked with looking after their workforces. I mean, is there anything around that we can talk about now that would perhaps help managers who are listening?
Well, there was a big discussion here, actually, our department, because managers, they were feeling the burn. They need only point of socialization of their subordinates, but they also need to make sure that their well-being were going well, and the communication was doing good. But basically, I would highlight the aspect of a different kind of well, first we need a different kind of leadership. We need to mention the questions that are related to more autonomy, idea of not being in office or face-to-face all the time, and this seems clear. Part of the struggles of why managers are there and they don't feel supported is because they don't see their supporters and their team in person. But I think they should use the same tactics in general. Well, first to get some training on how to deal with this different aspect of the job that was not there before, but also apply the same things that we've been saying for non-managers, such as disconnect, plan your week ahead. It's sort of the same strategies would and are supposed to work for managers as well, but on the side, because they are responsible and they have to deal with a different kind of it's some tasks that we have some tasks that are added to their workload. They have to learn how to manage it.
And I guess what you're saying, lead by example, and something that Claire was talking about as well. Peter, you know, we're talking about the future of hybrid learning and certainly having a hybrid workforce. We know that's not going to go away, but how do you see it working in general terms so that it is a positive experience for most people? You know, just in a couple of sentences, please, because we're literally down to our last 2 or 3
Yeah,
minutes
I
now.
see. I see
I'll
the
ask all
clock.
of you
I see
this.
the
Yeah,
clock
you
ticking.
see
So
it.
I
Yes.
see it. I think it is positive because I think it's the choice that people should have. But I think there's an element here that the word trust needs to be brought up about any relationship, whether that's work or personal.
Yes.
And I think that's the culture where managers and senior management teams need to support one another on that and allow that through this. This is going to be a culture shift for many organizations going forward, and allow individuals, as long as they're productive, and that whole debate about what's perceived as productive, particularly in an office environment, because you're not actually counting widgets if you're looking at engineering, because that's easier to measure. I think that if that works for the organization, so be it. But I think there is elements that some organizations it will work for, some will have to adapt again. But I think it's that element of not fearing change and recognize that you're not going to please everyone. But I think that's the joy of manager. You were never going to please everyone. I think it's what works for the majority of your teams, but have that culture ripple effect from the top, and echoing Claire's point that the leadership team need to allow that support and that trust. And that dreaded debate you can have about the fear of failure. Sometimes failure is good, but many organizations seem to fear that. And as individuals, we naturally fear that as well. So I think all in all, it's good to give the power of choice. And I think a lot of employees, whatever age, will be looking for that moving forward.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. Thank you. And Claire, it is about acceptance, isn't it, overall, that this is where we are, but this is how we're going to make it work.
Yes, and it should be a positive message. You know, everyone who's done it has seen the positives of having more time at home, hopefully having more choice and control over their working day. We've broken that sort of unwritten rule that you couldn't, you know, a lot of offices did have, oh, you wouldn't be productive if you were working from home. We've broken that. And I think people have brought more human ways of managing into the last couple of years as well, because we've been supporting each other through a crisis. We've seen people's kids on Zoom calls or whatever. We've brought sort of the more human element into the workplace. So I hope we can hang on to all of that as we move forward.
Great, Claire, thank you very much. And final word to you, Pedro. You've done all this research. Hopefully you'll have all the results for us come July. What would you like to see happen? And certainly where do you see it being most productive in the future?
Well, I think from my own perspective, I would like good systems, and from a systemic level, put in place, and in a way that you really observes how the respective civil services they work. So I would really like to see, and maybe because I'm a lawyer by background, I would like to see good regulation that really listens to everyone. There's evidence that this makes a lot of difference in how people, it creates certainty and how people perceive remote work. So I would go for a great regulation.
Great, we'll take that, and we look forward to the same discussion a year on. Let's see where we're at. For now, though, panel, thank you very much for joining me. So huge thanks to Pedro, to Claire, and also to Peter. Lovely to talk to you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And I hope you enjoyed that particular discussion. Great to hear from our panelists there. Our big thanks to them. Don't forget, we have one more panel discussion to go, but right now we're going to have a short break. So we'll see you back here. Enjoy your cup of tea at about 2:45. Thank you.